Store owner kicks out struggling family in tears. Seconds later, Keanu Reeves walks in and teaches him a lesson he'll never forget. When a poor mother and her hungry kids are humiliated and thrown out of a high-end store, no one expects what happens next. Just when all hope seems lost, a Hollywood legend steps inside, not for fame, not for cameras, but for justice. What Keanu Reeves does in next few moments leaves the entire store speechless and turns a heartless decision into a life-altering lesson. This isn't just about kindness, it's about standing up when it counts. Watch how a single moment of compassion becomes a turning point for everyone in the room. A story that proves true character isn't shown under the spotlight, but in the shadows when no one's watching. Get ready for goosebumps. Let me know if you'd like a shorter version for thumbnails or headlines. It started like any other day. People were going about their business, checking their phones, standing in line waiting for their turn. Nothing seemed out of place until the door opened, and in walked a young mother with two small children. You could tell right away they weren't there to shop for anything fancy. Their clothes were worn, their shoes dusty, and the mother's eyes were scanning the room, not with excitement, but with quiet desperation. She wasn't looking for luxury. She was looking for mercy. They approached the counter hesitantly, the little boy pointing to a loaf of bread on a nearby shelf. The girl tugged at her mother's sleeve and whispered something, maybe about being hungry, maybe about being scared. That part doesn't really matter. What matters is what happened next. The store owner looked up from his register, saw the family, and his expression changed. Instantly, not with concern, not with compassion, just judgment, cold, sharp, and fast. He didn't even ask what they needed, didn't care why they were there. He just raised his voice and said something like, "We don't serve beggars out." Now the words hit the room like a slap. The mother froze, the kids froze, and for a second you could feel every eye in the place shift away. Not toward them, but away, away from discomfort, away from confrontation, away from responsibility. She tried to explain something about not wanting charity, just asking for a little help, a little patience. But the man behind the counter wasn't listening. He walked out from behind the register, pointed at the door, and told them to leave again. This time louder. People watched. No one moved. No one said a thing. You ever notice how the world can turn its back in the most subtle ways? It's not always a shout. Sometimes it's the way someone looks away, the way they suddenly get real interested in their phone, the way silence becomes complicity. That's what was happening here. A room full of people, and not one hand extended. The mother lowered her head. Her son started to cry. She picked them both up, one on each side, and turned to walk out, carrying not just her kids, but the weight of humiliation that no one should ever have to carry, especially not in front of their children. And in that moment, you could feel it, that quiet kind of heartbreak that doesn't scream, doesn't ask for attention. It just lingers, and that's when everything changed. Because sometimes when the world turns its back, someone walked in who reminds us what it means to show up. And believe me when I say what happened next wasn't just a twist in the story. It was a wake-up call. It's strange, isn't it, how a room full of people can feel completely empty when no one's willing to act. You'd think, out of the 10-20 people standing around, someone would have said something. Just a word, "Hey, that's not right." Or maybe just, "Let them be." But no, no one moved, no one intervened, not a sound. What hit hardest wasn't the store owner's cruelty. That was expected. Some people carry power like a weapon. But the silence, that was louder than anything he said. It was the kind of silence that makes you question if we're still listening to our own conscience anymore. People looked down, looked away, pretended to be fascinated by a label on a juice bottle they weren't even going to buy. Anything to avoid eye contact with injustice happening right in front of them. And I get it. Some people freeze. Some are scared to speak up, scared to get involved, but silence has weight. It's not neutral, it leans. And in that moment, it leaned away from the struggling mother and her two hungry kids, and leaned right into the side of the man kicking them out. You could feel the tension in the room like a thick fog, and yet nobody cut through it. One man checked his watch. Another woman whispered to her friend. Someone even stepped to the side to give the family space, as if their poverty might be contagious. That's the thing. Poverty isn't a disease, but indifference, that might be, because when we fail to speak up, when we convince ourselves that it's not our place, we give permission for cruelty to grow roots, permission for shame to settle on those who least deserve it. It's easy to share a quote about kindness online, but real kindness, real courage looks like a single voice rising in a sea of silence. And that day, no one found their voice, no one stood tall. The mother didn't ask for sympathy, she didn't break down or plead. She simply gathered her children, eyes locked on the ground, and walked toward the exit. And even then, no one followed. No one asked if they were okay, and that's what sat with me. Not just what happened, but what didn't happen. All the chances to act, all the chances to care, all the chances wasted. But what makes this story matter isn't just the heartbreak of that moment, it's what happened next, because in the quiet, when dignity was being erased and shame was being served cold, someone finally stepped forward. And that's the thing about silence, it only wins when no one dares to break it. And just when the moment seemed to pass, when the mother and her kids had reached the door, heads low, invisible to a room full of people, pretending not to see, that door opened again. He didn't walk in with fanfare, no entourage, no spotlight, just a calm, quiet presence that carried more weight than anything that had just happened. You know those people who don't have to say much to change the entire energy in a room? That's what it felt like. Something shifted, like the air took a deep breath. He glanced around, saw the mother holding her son close, her daughter clutching her hand, both of them wearing expressions no child should ever wear. Then his eyes landed on the store owner, still standing there, puffed up with kind of pride that comes from mistaking power for importance. But he didn't confront, didn't shout, didn't try to make a scene. He just stood there for a moment, taking it in, reading the room, understanding exactly what had just happened without needing a single explanation. That kind of awareness doesn't come from titles or status. It comes from living with your eyes open, your heart engaged, and in that moment, he wasn't a celebrity, he wasn't a star. He was just a man who recognized wrong and wasn't about to let it slide. There was a stillness to him. He didn't rush. He didn't try to become the center of the story. That's the difference between someone who wants attention and someone who brings presence. The kind of presence that makes you realize, without them saying a word, that something's about to change. He walked past the frozen crowd, each person suddenly reminded of their silence, and not because he judged them. Just by being there, he made them see themselves. That's powerful, when someone's presence alone can hold up a mirror to your inaction. Then, without asking for permission, without hesitation, he walked up to the mother and crouched slightly so he could meet her children's eyes. He said something soft. We couldn't hear it, but we could feel it. Her face, tight with shame just moments ago, began to loosen. Her eyes welled up, not with sorrow this time, but with something closer to relief, and maybe a little disbelief. Because sometimes it only takes one person to say with their actions, you matter. One person to push back against indifference, one person to walk in not for themselves, but for someone who's already been pushed out. That's when I knew the real story wasn't about who spoke the loudest. It was about who showed up when it counted. He didn't make a speech, didn't point fingers, he didn't need to. His actions did all the talking. With gentle hands he reached into his pocket, not for a credit card, not to flash wealth, but to quietly pay for the food the family never got a chance to ask for. Bread, milk, some fruit for the kids, simple things, things most people wouldn't think twice about. But to them, in that moment, it was everything. And the way he did it, without hesitation, without drama, it said more than any lecture ever could. Then he turned to the store owner, calm, steady. He wasn't angry. He wasn't passive either. His presence was firm, like someone who's seen enough of the world to know that real strength isn't measured by how loud you shout, but by how softly you stand your ground. He didn't scold, he didn't insult, he simply told the truth, through his eyes, through his choices, and in doing that, he exposed everything. The owner, suddenly realizing who was standing in front of him, tried to regain control, offering apologies that didn't quite land, words that felt hollow. Because once dignity has been stripped in public, A half-hearted sorry doesn't restore it. Not when it's too little, too late. But what he did next, that was the moment that stuck with me. He didn't humiliate the man. He didn't ask for punishment or demand an audience to watch. Instead, he left space for reflection. He gave the store owner something so few people get when they've done wrong, a chance to see himself, to sit in his own silence and maybe, just maybe, choose to grow from it. That's what real compassion looks like. It doesn't come wrapped in ego or pride. It's not about rescuing people so you can feel like a hero. It's about seeing someone's worth, even when the world decided they're not worth noticing. He didn't have to step in that day. He could have walked past, stayed quiet, avoided the discomfort, but he didn't. And the beauty of that moment wasn't in the money he spent, it was in the message he sent. Asterisk, you're not invisible, you're not alone, you deserve to be treated with respect. Asterisk, we throw words like kindness around all the time, but kindness without action is just a slogan. What he did was different. It wasn't charity, it was dignity. It wasn't performance, it was principle. And that's the kind of power this world needs more of. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that gives it. You could see the change happen in real time. The store owner, who just moments before had been so sure of himself, so firm in his position, so proud of his authority, started to shrink, not physically but in presence. It was like someone flipped a mirror around and forced him to see what everyone else had seen. The coldness in his voice, the way he'd looked at that mother like she didn't belong, the kids he treated like burdens instead of human beings, and now he was standing face to face with someone who had every right to embarrass him but chose not to. That's what made it powerful, the absence of vengeance, the refusal to stoop. Because when you're faced with your own ugliness and the other person still shows you grace, that sticks with you. It lingers in your gut in a way that anger never could. The man's words were few, but they landed heavy, not dramatic, just honest. A quiet kind of confrontation that didn't humiliate but revealed. And that's the thing about truth. When delivered without ego, it cuts sharper than any insult. It bypasses defense and goes straight to the part of you that asterisk knows. Asterisk, the store owner tried to recover, tried to offer something, anything to save face. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the sudden realization that everyone was watching now, not because he had power, but because he had misused it. But no amount of damage control could undo the moment. The regret had already sunk in. You could see it in his hands, suddenly unsure of what to do, in his eyes, darting but unable to hold anyone else's gaze, in the way his voice, so loud before, now struggled to find its footing. And yet he wasn't attacked. He wasn't shamed. He was simply left to reflect. That's the part that hit hardest for the rest of us watching. The moment when you realize that transformation doesn't always come from punishment. It comes from being seen fully in your worst moment and still being given a chance to do better. The people in the store who had looked away earlier were now paying attention. You could feel the tension had shifted from fear to reflection, from judgment to understanding, not just about what had happened, but about who we all choose to be when no one's watching. Because in the end, the greatest regret doesn't come from being called out. It comes from realizing you could have done the right thing the first time and didn't. And in that silence that followed, you could almost hear it, that quiet, uncomfortable truth. Asterisk, sometimes the real lesson isn't taught by words, but by watching someone live the one you failed to. Asterisk, long after the moment passed, after the mother and her children left the store with their heads held just a little higher, after the quiet man disappeared back into the rhythm of his own life, people were still talking. Not in loud voices, not in gossip or noise, but in that quieter kind of reflection that lingers when you've just witnessed something that cuts deeper than surface-level kindness. Because what happened in that store wasn't about money. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't even just about helping a struggling family. It was about what it means to asterisk show up, asterisk, to be present in someone else's pain without needing recognition for it. That's what sticks with people, not the dramatic acts, the real ones, the raw ones, the ones no one expected, but everyone felt. We live in a world that's constantly telling us to look out for ourselves, to keep walking, to mind our own business. But every now and then, Someone walks in and reminds us what humanity really looks like, and it doesn't wear a uniform, it doesn't need a badge, it doesn't shout. It just steps forward quietly when it matters most. That day, in that little store, a line was drawn, not between rich and poor, not between customer and owner, but between those who act and those who don't, between people who see suffering and look away, and people who see it and say, asterisk, not on my watch. Asterisk, and the truth is, that line exists in every room we walk into, in every hallway, every street corner, every bus stop, every boardroom, every place where someone is being made to feel small. The question is, who will we be when that moment finds us? Because kindness isn't soft, it's not weakness, it's not optional, it's a decision. Every single time, and sometimes all it takes is one person to choose it, to tip the scale, to change the ending, to plant a seed that says, asterisk, you matter. Asterisk, that's the real takeaway. Not what he did, but why he did it. Not because he had to, not because it would go viral, but because it was asterisk right. Asterisk, and that's the kind of legacy that lives beyond the headlines. We don't always get to plan the moments that define us, but we do get to choose who we are in them. And when that moment comes, when the world turns its back, when the silence gets heavy, just remember, asterisk, you don't need to be famous to be someone's reason to believe in good again. Asterisk, so, what started as an ordinary day became something unforgettable, not because of what was bought or sold, but because one man chose to lead with heart. Instead of ego, he didn't raise his voice, he didn't demand change, he simply was the change, and that's the lesson. The world doesn't need more noise, it needs more presence, more people willing to stand up when it's easier to walk away, more moments where humanity outshines pride and compassion silences cruelty. Because in the end, people won't remember the size of your bank account, title on your door, or the number of followers you had. They'll remember how you made them feel when no one else even noticed they were there. So when that moment finds you, and it will, don't look around, don't wait. Be the one who steps forward.